In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace the passenger side CV axle on this Hyundai Santa Fe. Let's get started. Use a 21mm socket, remove all 5 of your lug nuts, and then remove the wheel. If your wheel is stuck, put a lug nut back on, use a rubber mallet from the backside, and tap it on the tire, not on the rim, to break it free. Now that it's broken free, remove your safety lug nut, which did its job, and pull the wheel off. Remove your axle nut. It takes a 32mm socket. However, this is a locking nut where it has to get peened over, so we have to actually unstake it here. Use a chisel and a hammer and just punch it out a little bit. Otherwise you'll have a more difficult time removing it, especially if you're doing this with a breaker bar. Don't worry about getting it perfect. There we go. Just push it out a little bit. That should be plenty. Once again, 32mm socket. It shouldn't be very tight. There it is. Now with it off, make sure your axle pushes through the hub. This one is clearly free. If yours is stuck from rust buildup, take a punch and a hammer, tap it through until it breaks free. Use a 17mm socket, remove the 3 fasteners that hold on your ball joint to the control arm. Of course, you can remove the strut bolts, but I'm going to choose to do it this way and separate the knuckle at the bottom. There's 1 bolt and 2 mounting nuts. Now you can pull the control arm down, separate the ball joint from the control arm. There we go. Now you should be able to pull out on the knuckle, push the axle through. Okay, there we go. Sometimes you might need some help from a pry bar just to get this broken free. Pull the axle aside. And now all we have to do is pop it out of the transmission. I'm going to take part of this shield down here at the back just so I can pry it down so I can get a little bit more visibility in there. You might not have to, but I think it definitely helps improve visibility. 3 10mm bolts is all I'm going to take off. 1 over here, 1 here at the back on this bracket, and 1 right over here. This one holds this shield onto the bracket. The bracket does have a little tab that prevents it from coming down, but now I can pry just enough to see right through here. Now take a long pry bar and stick it right behind the axle, in between the transmission and the axle. Try to pop it out. Sometimes this doesn't work. There is not a lot of space here to pry on, mostly because these edges are rounded. So you have to get it right in between the seal and the axle. This, keep in mind, might damage the seal. So if that happens, you're going to want to replace it. But basically, it just has to pop out. Got it. As you can see, that takes quite a bit of force. Now grab the axle and pull it straight out. There it is. There's your CV axle. Now to take this seal out, which I have to do, I hit it with the pry bar, and it's pretty difficult to not damage that seal unless you have different tools to take this axle out. And to replace the seal, the easiest way to remove it is to actually put a screw in right at the bottom and then pry the seal out. That's what I'm going to do. There it is. Not a lot of fluid comes out, which is a good thing. Not going to worry about losing too much. Install your new seal. You want to make sure it's the correct side. They are directional. There's an arrow on it. And once you line it up, you want to make sure that you only tap on the outside of the seal. So I have this cup from my ball joint press that fits perfectly on it. I'm going to use that as a little spacer so I can hammer it in. All right, that looks really good. Feel around to make sure it's even This is perfectly flat here. I'm gonna give it a couple more hits. Looks like right here it's a little further out than this side, so that should be fixed. But other than that, it looks great. Take your axle, slide it in carefully. Don't damage any boots on the way. Guide it into the transmission. Give it a couple twists to make sure that the splines are going to line up. Now add a little bit of anti-seize to the splines of the axle. This helps it not get stuck in the hub in the future. Next time this has to be serviced, it will hopefully come out nice and easy, just like it did this time. Take your axle and push it through. Make sure it slides onto the splines of the hub. Use the weight of the knuckle to press the axle into the transmission until it pops in all the way. Pull your control arm down and let's reset the ball joint into the control arm. Move the knuckle around if needed to line everything up. I'm going to start on the 2 mounting nuts first because the studs poke through and it's just easier to have this held in place. They are locking nuts on the end, so you won't be able to bottom them out completely by hand, but just start them on, and then if this lines up, then start in the bolt. Sometimes it doesn't line up right away and you have to snug up the mounting nuts first. I got this on, so let's tighten all of them up. I'm going to start with the bolt. That'll pull the ball joint down. And the 2 mounting nuts. The torque on all 3 of these is going to be 80 foot-pounds. All right, those are all torqued. Let's put this shield back up. 3 bolts. That's tight. Put on your axle nut. I'm going to bottom it out with my impact, and then the torque is 217 foot-pounds, so as soon as it bottoms out, I'm going to stop. I'm not worried about over-tightening it because it's such a high torque. Let's torque it. 217 foot-pounds, once again, is the torque for this. I put a pry bar through my lug studs to hold the hub from spinning. That's torqued right there. Use a punch and a hammer and stake the axle nut down. Basically, this is what locks it in. You don't have to completely crush it down, just bend it over a little bit. That'll prevent it from loosening up by itself. Put the wheel back on. Reinstall all of your lug nuts, thread them on by hand to make sure they don't cross thread. And the torque for these, after you bottom them out, is going to be between 65 and 79 foot-pounds. I'm going to go for 79. This is still within the range, but it's on the tighter side. That's what I prefer. I'm going to bottom them out in a cross pattern to make sure the wheel is seated properly and also torque them in a cross pattern. Okay, here we go in a cross pattern. Double check them all. There you have it. Take it for a road test.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.